hit something.
All I did was move the mouse.
And he's a big guy.
Yeah.
And doesn't know.
See, I would say,
Didn't know when, where, how, or why.
give it to somebody at the front.
That happened to my
desk.
dad.
It's just.
Forward it to them
And
and
there
have
was
them.
pain associated.
Mhm.
you know,
There's
you know.
something. What's that?
So that just started off.
Oh, maybe you could put it on the Elmo.
One
Everything.
problem after another.
You got it.
That's what happened. My dad.
I'm not sure about that, but that means there's
That's from the last council meeting.
well, that's what's on this screen right
Yeah,
here.
that's the last council meeting. That was the last presentation at the last council meeting.
So somebody's controlling the screens right now, correct? No?
And he was going to, there's many things that he set into motion, being home in another room.
Well, then
Trying to piece
Yeah.
it together. And it could have
I
been
know, but I've seen it before. They nod, the camera goes up and down like nodding.
it's on the other side of the house, but he's been using
It is, I think it's gonna look terrible though.
he has fewer steps.
Plus somebody would have to turn that thing, plus somebody would have to turn this on.
No, it's actually, you actually put on this.
We have
that
Oh,
camera.
let me go, well, that's,
And he should have been going that away, somehow he moved this away. And I figured.
I would see if you could forward it.
It was a bathroom that took the blinds down, hit a brass tea cart that had glass tables, flipped it over, the plants went, the plants next to the plants went. And he was lucky nothing but because they had
You can?
3 weeks to.
See, you can zoom that camera, this camera here.
These brass trays. And
Yes,
it
or
happens.
on the Elmo.
But I don't think on a,
Years and years ago.
on an iPhone.
Brass trays with handles, and they sit on this tea cart. It's actually really
But
good.
data, like spreadsheets,
Well, that's what
They had taken the brass edging. bent
no, I think the easiest is if Mike can just forward it to somebody at the front desk who has the ability to print at the front desk.
But between the blinds, yes, it's on wheels.
Oh my God.
And so, you know, because he hit the end where the railing, he upended it, but it must have helped break his fall because lo and behold, there was no bruising, there was no lumps, there were no bumps. He couldn't walk because of the surgery on his spine.
says zoomed in.
2 days later in the hospital, and that started a whole new journey, and we go back again and again and again.
That's what you're saying.
It's still not fixed. That being said,
CFR zooms.
It's right here.
there's a leak, and they've tried to patch it 3 times.
My husband used him.
We suggest that there's another leak that they haven't thought about looking for because they dropped him in the emergency room. And
Dropped him?
when he came home, and I hadn't seen his back for 5 days, I'm like, I asked the surgeon, did you do something on his back? And they go, no. The bruise was black, this big, and there was a gouge because they hit, they were moving him from the MRI cart to the, back to the emergency room thing, and there's metal railings, and they didn't put the brace on, and they were going like this, and they had to throw him.
Yeah, this has worked for years now.
At the time, he was probably about 240, and he's 6'4". He's not 240 anymore, but
It was a horrible surgery.
How long was the healing?
are we,
We're waiting for this person who will be here with them.
Did you have to do rehabilitation?
Mark?
No, he said,
Isn't that, did I miss something? Isn't Mark still with us?
okay,
Chair?
Somebody asked me that the other day. and I'm like, oh my God.
Vice?
Yeah.
Yes, it says right
Well,
here.
he's trying to get that printed, so. He's obviously
All
having,
else fails,
that
we
showed
would
up
love
better
to see
there.
who was here.
He's obviously having success.
except now.
He hasn't come back yet.
This one
And I was not. I was otherwise.
We're waiting for the chair.
Mark, yeah.
Oh, come on. Did your mom
So we're still-
or dad have these issues?
Well, you have a quorum.
Trying to get back, but it's not, it's not.
Just so, everybody asked me why.
My fingers are still different now. Going in different directions, they're still straight.
There are other ways to do it.
Fingers crossed, so to
Believe it
speak.
or not, I think that's one of the easier ones.
I know, but I had a friend do it. She ended up with sciatica.
Goes wrong,
She's in pain all the time.
See, and that was part of his pain. It wasn't sciatica, but there were nerves being mangled, and then when they pulled off the cyst, apparently it was really adhered, so it pulled up a lot of things around her. So, all the things I didn't want to know.
I
They have,
I have nothing to complain about.
Yeah, I even feel like it's not even much to complain about compared to some other people's lives. was crying.
Well, see, that's what was happening to him with his cyst. He couldn't walk, his pains were shooting.
Yeah, and I had this,
Can you swim?
band across my right
can
here
swim.
that hurt all the time.
I can swim.
I allergic to almost everything.
Oh, Longster's such a beautiful pool.
It is.
I said, wait, he hadn't come back yet, so he's probably having success.
I'm not gonna do it.
I do. With this one, they, they said, hold off. Like
Yes, we'll do that under director's report.
Yes, please.
then join. Google. Machines.
Yes.
And I asked, I was doing this, it's got holes in my shoulder, my stitches aren't even out yet.
Oh,
It was Wednesday.
yeah, no.
You could email us.
See what they say about gym. Because PT is the same thing as going to the gym. She said she'd be better going to the gym.
Can you probably?
Look, wait, you got a quorum, see?
By now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we'll see.
I think there's a lot to Eastern medicine, it's worth trying.
Absolutely.
I can't do cartwheels yet.
I could never do once.
I just, because I've been sedentary a lot.
But then somebody's gotta-
With him.
Somebody's got to turn the page.
Yeah,
and all
man.
that stuff.
Skip.
I'm getting to where I can do lots of things I couldn't do.
I just sat in a meeting with you. That's right.
Well, having had foot injuries, I still understand this.
Okay.
Every time I go, there's something else that I can do.
Wonderful. Maybe that's what we should do.
I'm just ecstatic.
Okay. So I'm going to call to order the Parks and Recreation Board meeting for Tuesday, July 23rd, 2019.
Calling it to order.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, the,
Next one is the.
Yes.
okay, so,
I move to approve.
okay, the approval of minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Okay,
Say the motion passes.
the motion passes. Any citizens to be heard regarding items not on the agenda? No. Okay, moving on to new business items. So starting with 4.1, the discuss Imagine Clearwater.
Yes, there was a request at the last meeting for staff to come from Ms. Langley to come and discuss Imagine Clearwater. Mr. Delk is out of town at the time of this meeting, so he gave an extensive debriefing to, this is Kevin Dunbar, the Director of Parks and Recreation, and who will be presenting to you today. If needed in the future, Mr. Delk has made himself available for the October or January meeting. But for today, Mr. Dunbar will be presenting the current status of Imagine Clearwater. You may recall there was just a council meeting last Monday, I believe, where Mr. Delk gave his presentation to the council.
First of all, good evening to everybody, and thanks for your service. It's very much appreciated. As Mike said, Mr. Delk is not available. He was out of town, so not wanting to just push this off till October, but he has offered to come in October. One of the things he wanted me to point out to you is that, as Mike just said, he just did a update to the council at their work session on Monday. He's doing those on a monthly basis for council, so he encourages everybody just to, if you don't know, the council meetings are all videoed, and then they're streamed, so you can go back and you can always, watch those presentations that he's doing. But his update this past week was that Stantec, who's the city's architect on the project, they have produced now 15% drawings for the Imagine Clearwater project. They expect that by either the end of the fourth quarter this year, or the first quarter of 2020, to really be at about 100% design drawings.
Fourth quarter of this year?
Fourth quarter this year, so the end of this calendar year, or very early in the next calendar year.
100% design?
Yes. If that schedule stays on task, they're looking at the summer of 2020 to potentially begin construction, and anticipating a construction window of about 18 months. Still got to look at the kind of the phased approach to that, like when you're talking about things like the amphitheater, wanting to still be able to keep the current programming that's going on in the park active for as long, or if not the complete process. And then just at one point, you'd have the last one on the old stage, and then you'd have the new event on the new stage. So those are all details to work out. Big thing, a big kind of topic of conversation was that's all, they've come to a number for what Imagine Clearwater. You've heard that range of, I think, 35 to 55 million. The number is actually 62 million. Is the number that's being looked upon. So one of the things that was discussed was, okay, well, where does the $62 million come from? And the breakdown is, right now we have 19.5 million between Penny 3, which was the last go around with Penny for Pinellas, as well as the Penny 4 allocation, which the first allocation for Penny 4 begins this October, be about $19.5 million. A term that Michael uses, or Mr. Delk uses, is buildable sites. So we have 2 buildable sites that will be available for assuming referendums pass, which would be the old Harborview site and the old City Hall site. And the current appraised value of those is about $29.5 million. And the city would anticipate taking those funds and putting those into the Imagine project. And then there's kind of various other sources of funds, about $5 million. Kind of leaves right now a delta of about $25 million. It is anticipated right now to do that as some kind of general debt. The city currently, to its general fund, doesn't have anything bonded out for that. So the idea would be that the balance of the money would come from some kind of a debt service to fund the the balance of that. There may be other funding sources that might be looked at over time, but that's kind of the idea. As I mentioned earlier, there's monthly, Mr. Delk does monthly updates to the council. So if you want to track that in that fashion, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
I do have a question based on the information that you just provided. I have watched the working sessions, and I did watch the Monday session and the session after that. I think it was a Thursday session, the 18th, 15th, and 18th. And I feel like there's a lot of focus on the design in those conversations, and of course that is very meaningful. But at the same time, I think the lack of impact that's actually needed to have a discussion about for the transportation, for the trash, for all these necessary conversations. When do you perceive that would actually, those conversations would begin?
I think a couple of things. First of all, when you're looking at a facility of this size, how it's going to be operated hasn't even been determined yet. Will there be a conservancy group, and will that conservancy group operate it? Will Parks and Recreation operate it? Will there be a new city department created that might, those are all things that I think once it's designed and once once it's known what that is, then you will you will take a look at seeing how that may or may not transpire, or how that may or may not happen. The other thing is, if you listen to Mr. Delk's conversations, this started out as part of the Urban Land Institute, ULI, came out and did a study of downtown and basically the Bluff area. And that goes from Coachman Park all the way up to the Seminole boat ramp, which that project is currently in process and under construction. So I think one of the things, Seminole boat ramp.
Okay.
So one of the things that Mr. Delk has done was kind of bring the focus back to the term that the city has categorized for that is second century. All the second century projects. So how does everything all tie, and really look at activating, you know, that waterfront. And so there's a lot of pieces and a lot of things that are going on right now. Imagine Clearwater or Coachman Park, or for some people, the amphitheater. That's one component of it. But it's really how are you integrating everything, including, like, you know, I use the term buildable sites. That's all part of the ULI study. So it's looking at how to pull all those pieces together. And that's what Michael's you know, working on right now in terms of figuring out that piece. One of the things the ULI report talked about is creating a conservancy group. Especially up in the Northeast, that's not an uncommon way of going about doing things. I know, as a matter of fact, later this week I'm going up to Philadelphia. You know, Philadelphia's Central Park is called Fairmont Park, and there's a conservancy group that runs Fairmont Park, puts on all the programs and activities, and that's the whole area where the Museum of Art is and where the Rocky Steps are and all that. That all ties in. So those are all things that are going to be studied and taken a look at. So in terms of how transportation, how trash and things like that are going to be handled, how programs can be handled, that's all yet to be determined. I know one of the things I think that's come up here is transportation. Where's people going to park? I'll be honest with you, the desire is not to park along the waterfront. The idea is you park in downtown, and you migrate through downtown, you migrate through the various shops and businesses and restaurants that are in downtown, and you interact with downtown. So yeah, it's one of the things I always talk about is like every day, you know, Mike and I park in the MSB parking garage. Some people will tell you there's not enough parking in downtown. You park there anytime you want, just not between the hours of 8 and 5, but the rest of the time that's open. I will tell you we've really hit success when someone will park in the MSB parking garage and doesn't think a 3-block walk out to Cleveland Street and the 400 blocks is a very far walk. Because, you know, when you go to a city, that's kind of how it is. If you only park 3 blocks away, that's, you know, that's a pretty good thing. But we have to have the pieces and the reasons for people to want to go do those things.
I'm just going to piggyback on that if that's okay. So what I'm understanding is in the design process and in the package of the $62 million, I'm still going to go back to the trash removal. Is that not part of the $62 million? The design of maybe trash compactors there on the site where it's an easy process to clean the park up so it's not going into our waterways, you know, during and after events? Or is that not part of the $62 million?
I think that level of detail has to be, but I would doubt that there'll be trash compactors there. There's other mechanical ways, like as example, when we maintain Clearwater Beach, we do something called the load and pack operation. So it's a mechanical operation. We don't pick up most of the trash cans and dump them into something. There's actually a piece of equipment that goes out, picks it up, flips it into the back of the truck, puts the can back down again, goes to the next can.
Absolutely, and I live on the beach, so I see that quite
Yeah.
often. And not only in my opinion, but my surrounding community don't think that's even enough. And let me explain that. So the situation at hand is this: the dumpsters, and Michael has, we've had emails and conversations with get his name. Yes, and he is the
Landscape manager.
Okay, and I've actually had this conversation with him, and in you know, his stance is this. They are out there a certain amount of time during the day. After 4:30, they can't do anything until the next morning, which when I'm out there swimming at 9 a.m., those dumpsters are packed full and spewing of garbage.
The dumpsters or the trash cans?
The trash cans.
Okay.
Excuse me, let me reiterate that. And on top of that, the beaches are strewn with garbage, down to diapers. And so the conversation that I had with him and Michael is, could we not consider boots on the ground? I see your truck out there, and I know exactly what you're describing, but it's not adequate. It's not adequate to keep up with so much of the trash, and we're trying to keep our beaches clean. And as a resident of Clearwater Beach, I'm surrounded by my neighbors telling me, can't you say something? Well, here I am. I do have a voice. And so I'm just putting that out there as a concern for a venue that's going to see, what, 5,000 people?
Well, it could have as many as 14 to 16,000, depending upon what the event is.
Okay.
What you're referring to is how many potential fixed seats there would be if it was a fixed seat event. We're looking at, I think, about 4,500.
Okay, for fixed seat, and that's not including the lawn. So those are concerns, real impact concerns for the residents of this city and county. And I grew up here, and so I've seen Clearwater actually be clear water. And so I'd like to have that conversation if there's roundtables that could be, you know, brought together with the heads that can actually talk to the community members and have these discussions, because really it's not an open door. Nobody's really talking about it in our neighborhoods, and now we're going to have even more impact, and that's a concern. That's just a concern. Yeah. Thank you.
When we had our meeting last time, what we brought up was the parking issue, that you're going to be removing, I think, was it 600 spaces, and have just the little spaces out here?
Basically, I think the plan is all of the asphalt parking that was part of the Harborview Center, when that building went away, eventually that will go away too. One of the things it's viewed upon is your parked car has one of the best views in the United States being parked there.
And my concern last meeting was, and what we put in the minutes last time, was that one of our big concerns is to have a 45 to 5,000 seat amphitheater. You're going to have two issues from that. One is what you mentioned, people are going to have to look for parking in downtown. Most people are not familiar with parking downtown, which means you're going to have people trying to figure out where to park, getting frustrated, and not coming to the next event because they couldn't find a place to park. Which means that amphitheater may end up being underutilized because of parking frustrations. You get that sometimes in St. Petersburg even. The other issue is on that bluff and the way sound carries. Sound carries more in and around water than it does with a lot of trees. So you're going to have a lot of sound carrying up the hillside. If Harborview Center and City Hall end up being condominiums, you're going to have a lot of residents. I used to live in Atlanta, Georgia, and they put an amphitheater in near a residential area called Chastain Park. Pretty small, like what, 1,500 seats maybe?
Venue, yes.
Very small venue. They have to be very careful how they use it, because the citizens in and around Chastain Park are irate most of the time, and they have to end the concerts early and get people out of there early because of noise abatement. And that is 3/4 surrounded by woods. And only on the back side is it open to a street, and across the street is a restaurant, and then everything beyond that's residential. But even then, they have to be extremely careful about noise, even though they've got a lot of natural blockages. Here, you have the opposite situation. You have open water, limited trees, and you're gonna have residences right above it. You're gonna be faced with some noise problems, especially a size venue that big.
You know, as part of the initial review, I'll take them one at a time. As part of the initial review, there were noise studies done on the existing events that we were doing to get an idea of how far, you know, the sound travels. One of the things already is we have abatement programs in place. At the house mix, we only allow decibel levels up to 95. And one of the things is to control that. A lot of venues, it's 125 to 130. But we look to be at 95. We look to try to capture as much sound. And as part of the design is to try to retain as much sound within the park as possible. You know, in terms of the parking, quite frankly, we don't know what's going to go in on the City Hall site or what's going to go in on the Harborview site or what's going to go in some of the other areas. Not dissimilar, though, I think you're going to find that with the beach, there'll be incentives to developers that are going to develop areas, and the city is looking to have additional parking going in. Right now, it has plenty of parking for what downtown needs. But long-term, we know that's not going to be the case. And so those are things that are being looked at to have it put into the downtown core. You know, one of the hard things always is right now the city's parking division or the parking fund is a department that operates in the black. If it goes out and builds a couple of parking garages, say one on the beach and one on downtown, it'll operate in the red because you don't need them all the time, which means then the resident's going to have to offset the cost of that. I think if you look at a good example of looking at Clearwater Beach, you know, those have been around for a while. You heard about, you know, kind of parking, and the city, the city's always desire was to try to enter into some kind of public-private partnerships. It incentivized public parking at the Hyatt. It incentivized public parking at Surf Styles. It actually partnered with Pelican Walk to create public parking in that parking garage. So, you know, so it did that to create those opportunities while still maintaining a positive cash flow for the parking fund.
May I just interject just a small smidgen of comment towards what you just described with the parking? Why would we want more parking on the beach? We can't even get around to get to South Beach from North Beach without congestion. So wouldn't it be advantageous to bring the parking to downtown as you described? That's what you're hoping for, right? And in addition, try and incentivize the people that are actually going to the beach to take our public transportation systems. And how do we, you know, control that to make it effective for so many different sustainable reasons?
I'm sort of not really sure what you asked me, but I didn't say we were going to build more parking garages on the beach. I just used examples of over the last 15 or so years how we have gotten private development to actually build and add, you know, parking. Because I mean, in downtown, the city already has 2 public parking garages, the MSB, as well as Garden Avenue. But I think the thought is going to need to be more. Don't disagree with you that there needs to be a connection between Clearwater Beach and downtown in terms of an alternative way for transportation. That's just not a motor vehicle. And that's a regional issue, you know, that we have in this area. You know, everybody has at least 2 cars. If they have 3 kids, they probably have 5 or 6 cars. And that is our only way to get from one place to the other. Then you got to figure out, if you're going out to the beach, you got to figure out where you're going to park. That's why one of the things that we have shifted from events that we do that historically we've done on the beach to now having those events based out of the Coachman Park or downtown area, and it's about parking. It's about the ability to place people where they need to be placed.
Let me just go back to your comment about you did bring up you've tried the initiatives of public-private connection for parking, and I know you have because I live on North Beach and I remember the process. Again, going back to the question, why would you want more parking down there
On the beach?
on the beach?
I didn't say that we wanted
I
more.
think he's talking about having it downtown.
Yeah, I'm focused on downtown. You keep
Okay.
interjecting the beach, but I'm
Those
really talking about
initiatives
downtown.
that were,
I just gave an example
Last
of
year.
areas where we got the private sector, the private sector was incentivized to do parking, and I think you'll see similar things to that in downtown.
okay, yeah, I would rather see it in downtown, yes.
And in the interest, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Ms. Lang, but in the interest of keeping with the agenda, let's try to keep the comments here to Imagine Clearwater. Which the agenda item, if there are other items that need to come up later, we can certainly talk about them during board members to be heard and things like that. Ms.
Well,
Lang?
this is absolutely about Imagine Clearwater, because
Oh,
it's
I
gonna
I
impact
just meant about the parking on the beach.
even
and
more
beach
traffic
thing.
to and fro the beach. That's why it's part of Imagine Clearwater.
Okay, sure. Ms.
Yeah.
Lang, go ahead, I'm sorry.
You mentioned the 95 decibels.
Yep.
How can you guarantee that? Just out of curiosity, because I know, say ZZ Top was out there last year.
Last June, yes.
Okay. And I was watching them on television the last few days. They're not a quiet group.
Right.
They're
So
actually quite loud. I think it's their 50th anniversary. So
it
they're-
could be, they've been around a while.
Yeah, it was, and that's why I saw them. And so they were showing a number of their performances. They're sort of eardrum shattering
It
in
can
their
be.
noise level.
It can be.
So if you have a group like ZZ Top again, they're going to go over 90. I wouldn't be surprised if they go over 150 decibels.
Okay, so
So what do
I
you
said,
do for
yeah, I
that?
said 95 at the house mix. So we actually have an operator sitting at the house mix with a device measuring the decibels. And they're adjusting the sound based upon the decibels.
Okay.
So that's
Like-
that.
Like ZZ Top, the volume would be turned down on their instruments and their speakers.
Not on their, it'd be on the speakers, it wouldn't be on their
Like on their
instruments, yeah.
speakers, okay. Well, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and it's, what it is, it's an average of 95 decibels at the house mix. Like, we don't sit there and go, oh, it's 96, you have to turn it down.
Okay.
Because you're gonna have the spikes depending upon, you know, how the volume of music's gonna be.
Mhm.
And that's been 15 years we've been doing that. I'll be honest with you, the only really significant problem is with what we call the track shows. And that is usually the younger performers, you know, where you'll have, oh gosh, what was her name we had two? Cardi B. We had Cardi B 2 years ago, right? She doesn't have a band. The track show is they're playing a track of music and she's singing.
Right.
And there's more bass in that track of music than you can shake a stick at. And it's that thump, 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 you know, that will get people. But typically, you know, something like one of those or Jazz Holiday, or quite honestly, we have very minimal amount of complaints. Wild Splash, that's a little different story.
It does concern me, because one reason is, I live behind Rutherford Hall. Interesting enough, when they're playing on the patio, I'm about I'm in Delaware Rose Estates, I'm 1 block off the bay, so I'm not directly behind. But when they play behind, in their little band behind on that back patio, I can hear them in my backyard. That doesn't bother me, because that ends early in the evening. Believe it or not, if Safety Harbor is having an event and they play, I think in that open patio on Main Street, it goes across Alligator Lake, and I can hear it like I'm sitting there.
I live off of Union Street and I hear it. It all depends on the atmospheric conditions of the way the sound is traveling that day, basically the way the winds are blowing.
But you get a canyon effect, you know.
Yeah, I live by Sylvan Abbey Cemetery,
Yeah.
okay? In the winter, I hear the police pistol range on Countryside Boulevard, because I know what that sound is. I hear the high school football game at Countryside High School. I'm a mile and a half away. But again, it just depends on the atmospheric conditions, you know, and how they are going. But how we mitigate that is that during the week, our performances end at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
On the weekends, it's 10.
Okay.
We think that's reasonable.
No, that is.
You know, and that, so, yeah, so, and we have done that since day one. I mean, that's our piece of how we move forward.
As long as that's being considered, that's fine. I just.
Yeah, no one has had any conversation about doing anything different than
You know,
that.
$500,000 for a house and. or
Yep.
condominium,
No, understood,
and
understood.
have their-
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, you know, what the desire is some kind of mixed-use development, is what it's gonna be, so.
Okay, thank you.
I think you mentioned about the two properties, Harborview and City Hall. Those will be coming up for referendum?
They have to, yes.
They have to?
They have to.
What is it, over 500,000 or something?
No, it's charter restriction. It's basically, the easiest way to explain it is anything on the west side of Osceola to the water. It's kind of considered sacred ground by the charter, and so therefore, if anything different is going to be done there, it has to be voted on by the voters.
So you know, there was a whole group of old guard people who were, you do not get rid of that property.
Mhm.
So you're prepared for.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways this whole process was a very public process. Some of the people that Saved the Bayfront, I think, was their was the name of the group. They were included as part of the process, so that everybody was stroking the same way. And I think they understand. I mean, there's a certain amount of that. If you're going to have success, there's a certain amount of that has to be integrated in. And so there was very good support for what was there. As you know, there's already been one referendum on things to do in Coachman Park, like as an example. Right now, that new band shell can be built. It's already been approved to be built where it was, where the existing one is. We take the existing one down, and we can build a new one with all those amenities. The new location, as part of the Imagine Clearwater design, that's one of those pieces that will be looked at. However, either selling or leasing the land, whatever is determined at City Hall and Harborview, that will have to go to the voters. But you're going to need to generate money to be able to do something. So, and I think everybody understood that as part of the process.
And then regarding, transportation and parking, has the city ever done anything like shuttle people from Coachman, or not Coachman, Bright House, Spectrum?
Actually, we have. Actually, Joe DiMaggio. We have had a partnership with PSTA, because it's a straight shot down Drew Street.
Right.
That for certain events where it's kind of interesting. Some events no one will take advantage of, and other ones, we do the Hispanic Heritage Festival. We had over 2,000 people we moved. But that parking lot at Joe DiMaggio, and it's kind of run the other way too. Last year we did a highly successful event at the Eddie Moore Complex, where we were on ESPN for 4 days. There's not, you've been by the Eddie Moore Complex, there's not enough parking to support 3,500 people going to a softball tournament, but there is a Joe DiMaggio. And we park there and we use trolleys to shuttle people around.
And how many spaces?
We have over 900 spaces in the parking lot. For a Philly spring training game, we have parked as many as 1,900 cars, utilizing some of the multi-purpose fields and things like that. Straight shot down Drew Street, works pretty well.
Yeah.
All right, next item?
So you can confuse that.
Yes.
Not too,
Solicitation on North Beach.
Jeff, I believe this was something that you had said to me, so I was not entirely clear what the content of the item was, so if you'd like to
Yes.
elaborate on that, and maybe staff can address it.
Yes, so, when I sent you the email on 6/11/2019, their neighbors were complaining about individuals walking the streets of Clearwater Beach North, and they had these orange vests on with these ID tags from my Clearwater, and they were soliciting. And it became an uncomfortable situation for the neighborhood, just not knowing who these people are. I did come across one individual, and I sent you the picture of his tag. And I asked him, you know, what is your business here? You know, what are you? He didn't want to talk to me. And I said, well, do you mind if I take a picture of your badge so I can do my own research and follow up? And he reluctantly showed me his badge. I took a picture and we parted ways. And that's when I sent you the email, was with the solicitation on North Beach. I don't know if it happens anywhere else in Clearwater, but they're everywhere.
Okay. Yes, you sent me an email with that, with the photograph and everything. I forwarded that, or I replied to you and added the code compliance manager.
Oh no, I didn't get a reply from you.
Oh, are you sure?
Yeah, most possible.
Well,
It might have gone to my junk.
Okay, well, I certainly forwarded it to the code compliance manager. That is a code compliance issue. If there are people acting in violation of the city code, I'm happy to forward items like that on, but it's not really the purview of this board as Parks and Recreation. That's more of a code compliance issue. There is a code compliance board. You know, I'm always happy to help any citizens that come to me with looking to contact other departments, but it's not necessarily a function of this board. I don't know if it's something that as a department director you.
Yeah, no, and you know, I mean, yeah, Mike's right. I mean, it doesn't. It's not anything within our swing, if you will. So it's not. Having said that, I can give you some background, and that is more than likely if they had ID badges on, you cannot solicit in Clearwater unless you have a pull-day permit. So if they pulled a permit, and usually when they have an ID badge on and things like that, they more than likely have pulled the permit. They're able to go door to door, with the exception of if your neighborhood is a non-solicitation neighborhood, because when they pull their permit, they're given the guidelines for what they're able to do and what they're not able to do. So just because they have a permit doesn't allow them just to go any place. I can tell you again, I live in Clearwater. My neighborhood's non-solicitation, and we deal with them all the time.
Really?
Yep. And it is your best avenue is if you are uncomfortable with the person, you call the non-emergency police number and you ask for them to respond.
Okay, I'll just let my neighborhood know.
Because that is one of the ways that some people try to figure out who is or isn't home,
Yes.
and then they come back after.
Exactly.
Which is why the people that are paid and trained to handle those things, you turn it over to them.
Thank you.
And that wouldn't be us guys.
Well, thank you for your guidance. I appreciate it, and taking the time out.
All right, thanks. Next item, public transportation to and from Clearwater Beach. We discussed that a little bit.
This was also from Mr. Lewis. So
Am I the only one that sent an agenda? I didn't send it. Did you? Okay. Yeah, again, it goes back to we have such an issue already, and with the Imagine Clearwater, I feel like that's just a conversation that needs to be had, and amongst our community. So open forum, round tables, you know, we have some really great public transportations between the ferry, the trolley, and the bus systems. And I think at the end of the day, with the onslaught of Imagine Clearwater, when it does open up, I think it's going to be a turtle crawl. And I think now's the time to start talking about it, if it hasn't already been brought to the table. I don't know.
No, and it has, but again, it's not probably a Parks and Rec Board discussion item. Okay. You know, the city has, through its engineering department, has a transportation division. A lot of the public transportation you're talking about probably falls to areas outside of Clearwater, FDOT, PSTA. So you know, you have those kind of avenues that are available to have, you know, those type conversations, if you will. But probably not something for this venue. I would suggest the best person to speak with would be Mr. Paul Pertels. He's the city's transportation manager. He's the guru on everything transportation, really in the region.
Thank you for taking the time out.
Thank you. All right. Let's see all the business items. We see none here. Read director's report.
What do we do? couple of
Okay.
pages first.
All right, so this is our quarterly projects update, which I believe everyone should have a copy of. Okay, we'll just start from the top. Spectrum Field and the Carpenter Complex. The department has been working hard to make sure that the county receives all deliverables that they have requested in terms of the city's application for funding from the TDC, the Tourist Development Council. And we are waiting for response from them in terms of questions and requests for more information.
By the way, on that project, that's kind of a big deal project because it's got a big price tag. Does anybody have any questions, especially while I'm here because I'm the project lead?
This is Spectrum Field, so, and the associated buildings, so this is to upgrade it, even though it's what, how old is that field?
16 years old, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're finishing our 16th year. And it kind of doves into something that we're going to get, that Mike and I want to talk about to the board a little bit. Yeah, but, you know, in the 16 years, the game of baseball has changed immensely. You know, it's not about Spectrum Field, it's about player development. For those who don't know this, the Phillies, their entire minor league operational system operates out of Clearwater, Florida. It doesn't operate anyplace else in the country, but Clearwater is the team's second home. So every player in their system rehabilitates through here. They just had the Major League Baseball draft last year. Every player gets processed through here, plays here, plus we have multiple minor league teams, both Gulf Coast League, everybody knows the Thresher brand, and that's high A, but all of their teams are all operated out of here. 16 years ago, if you follow baseball at all, you never heard the term analytics or money ball. Okay, that is how everything's done now. For the Phillies now, that's a 35-member department. Didn't exist before. Where do you house that? Where do you do that? When I came here in 1999, minor league spring training happens the same time almost that major league spring training happens. There's 65 guys in the major league camp. This year there was 235 players in the minor league camp. Where do you place them? Where do you house them? Where do they locker? You know, all that has changed. Nutrition has been something that has significantly changed in athletics. You know, 30 years ago, a new guy in the back of his baseball card, they would tell you what his winter job was. Now his job is to be a better baseball player. That's all he does. That's a 12-month for as long as that cycle can go. So facilities, not only for the player, but the accommodations, all the Latin academies that the Phillies do, in the Dominican Republic and Venezuela, those players are all funneled through here. Most of those kids are 18 years old, if not a little bit younger. They've got to assimilate into the American culture. How do they do that? Do they do that by playing baseball for 6 hours and then they go stay at the La Quinta and good luck for the rest of the day? Or do you provide a proper environment that's more like how our collegiate athletes interact with? So that's all part of how this all comes together in the player development piece, and the fact that we have the team that comes from the 4th largest media market in the country, and it is the one team from the largest media market that doesn't have 2 teams. So Chicago, LA, and New York all have 2 baseball teams. Philadelphia is the 4th largest media market, and it only has 1 team, all focused on here.
Now, on that question, being that they are such a large organization, they fund everything as far as player development, and they have it, how much, and are they contracted with Spectrum or Bright House Field for a certain amount of time, or?
Yeah. We have a 20-year agreement with them. It's got 4 years to go. That's why we're working on what life is after our current 20-year agreement.
Okay. And the facilities, it was taxpayer funded, or how much did the
right now, over the last 16 years, the biggest financial contributor to the facilities at Spectrum and the Carpenter Complex are the Philadelphia Phillies. The city owns everything. So whatever money is put towards that, the city owns everything in those facilities.
How much are they looking? Didn't it go up again? I thought I read a blurb in the paper.
So we're looking for the team, in order to get state funding, The team has a commit to 20 years, so that would be the minimum number, and that's the number we're talking about right now. They ask a team to commit for a long period of time. We're also looking at the development of the facilities. So we're looking at a $79.7 million overall project for all the different aspects. It would be phased in over 4 to 5 years, because there's only, we want to stay open the whole time, so there's only a limited amount of time where you can actually do work and not significantly, impact operations. The breakdown is we're asking for, and that's what Mike was talking about with the county, we're asking for $40 million from Pinellas County for funds that come from the tourist development tax. So not taxpayer money, but money that's generated from all the activity that we're bringing to the region. The city's committed $16 million from Penny for Pinellas to fund the city's contribution towards its facility. The state grant that we would apply for has a current net present value of about $13.7 million, and the team has committed $10 million plus all cost overruns. Give you an example, when we built Spectrum Field, we had the same kind of environment. The team had to contribute at least $3 million. They contributed $14 million. The city owns everything. One of the other things, just anecdotally to point out, is some people mention they signed a certain player in the offseason for a $330 million contract. At the time, it was the biggest contract in baseball. I said, well, if they can afford that, they can afford this. The team's perspective is that their job is to pay for the talent. They didn't ask us to contribute towards Mr. Harper's contract, even though when they signed Mr. Harper, we sold out 12 games in a row here and filled our hotels, put money in our bed tax. We're not asked to participate in that. Our participation is in the player development side in terms of the facilities to support the programming.
Is there any way we can go and see behind the scenes at Spectrum and Carpenter?
While the game's going on? No, I'm just kidding. Sure. One.
We used to have field trips.
But that's been 2.5 to 3 years ago.
No, I mean.
One of the things we used to do, and it's probably actually, let us check on how we might properly facilitate that with the sunshine laws. I'm looking at Pat while I'm saying that.
You could have a meeting there.
Yeah, we had in the past, we were there.
Yeah, because there's this tour that I do, and it's not about like going to see all the cool behind the scenes stuff in the ballpark. It's literally a tour on what are the improvements going to be and why are they needed.
Well, that's
and I've done it with the county administrator, done it with Commissioner Eggers. We have it coming up with Commissioner Peters. We're taking all the county commissioners through, not to show them because Clearwater's done a very good job of keeping up its facilities. Other communities in the area probably not so much, but that's because we're committed to investing in our facilities and making sure our facilities look, first rate. As, by the way, the team is. Remember I mentioned earlier, the team over the last 16 years, the biggest capital contributor of anything. The county and the state have only been asked, and the Phillies have been here 73 years, they've been asked one time prior to this to contribute any money, and they've each contributed revenue stream that equaled $8.2 million. But yes, we can facilitate that.
Yeah.
I have a question based on the pilot models of this design for this enhancement of the complex. My understanding is the Atlanta Braves are now doing their off-season outside of Sarasota.
Jennifer, can you speak forward? The microphone's in front of you.
Yeah.
But when you tip your head to the side, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So.
Yeah, Northport.
Right. So my question is, have you considered, looking at that project as a pilot model for what you want to do for the enhancements here?
Mike and I have actually toured the facility, yes.
Okay, so in comparison, what do we have already, and then where do the enhancements actually need to be? And you describe because it's larger. So larger in the sense of the press box, or larger in the sense of, what does that mean? Can you define that?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
The whole design of the new complex.
Which new complex?
I don't, are you, the designs for
The
the
upgrades
facilities, not
and-
necessarily a sports, like the playing area, the stadium itself is separate from,
Yeah,
I don't know, I've never been there, so I
okay,
guess
so out of the 70.
layman terms.
Okay, yeah, out of the 79.7 million, roughly 45 of it will be at Spectrum, and about 35 will be at the Carpenter Complex.
Okay, and the enhancements are for,
Oh, gosh. Everything from expanded group outing spaces, upgrading ADA accessibilities, providing expanded fan capacity, because as the team ascends, we're gonna, we're gonna get back to the days where we're averaging over 10,000 fans a game. This past year it was over 8,000. On the player development side, it's going to be creating some housing for some of the youngest players. It's going to be creating food service places. It's going to be expanding, upgrading fitness spaces and fitness facilities. It's going to be doing a lot of the repair and replacement at the stadium that a 16 to 20-year-old stadium is going to need. The seats all need to be replaced. The exterior wall of the stadium on the back side of the berm was a 20-year construction piece that's going to need to be replaced and going to need to be upgraded. So those are all the kinds of things. There's a huge menu of items to be done and be accomplished.
thank you.
any other items?
By the way, it didn't take that long in the staff meeting today when we talked about the item.
All right, so moving down the list, Crest Lake Park. This is $6.4 million to a full renovation of Crest Lake Park. That is proceeding forward. We just received 60% design drawings, and that construction is expected to begin by the end of January of 2020. The Countryside Sports Complex, this is replacing the existing building, improvements to the parking area, and upgrading the bleachers. The parking lot area was completed there, and now the building has begun, so that you can see some details about what the contractor is starting to do there. If you like to dive into the details there, but that's should be done by the first quarter of next year. The Courtney Campbell Trail overpass. This is the pedestrian overpass over State Road 60 at the base of the Courtney Campbell Causeway. That is still funded in the state fiscal year 2024. Just recently had a conference call with FDOT to look at they're still in very preliminary design stages, but they are proceeding with the design, even though the funding is not in place yet, which is great because it keeps things moving forward. The Long Center parking lot project is currently on hold, waiting for some funding clarification.
Parking lot change are you talking about?
The parking lot change, can we elaborate on that, because it's not really perfect.
There's two pieces to it. So when, if you remember back in the day, the junior tornado football program, or what was called Clearwater for Youth football, used to train in front of the Long Center.
Yeah, on that front lot.
So we've replaced all that at the Joe DiMaggio complex with the Art Capona field as well as additional fields. So the tornadoes are not there any longer. We've kept the fields waiting for funding to become available to us. Parking is always a premium at the Long Center. So we would add some grass parking. We keep a grass play field. But why we're on hold right now is we've been in conversations with the Tampa Bay Lightning as well as Clearwater for Youth. The Lightning have an initiative to put 500,000 sticks and street hockey balls in the hands of kids in the Tampa Bay area. When they hosted the All-Star game, they kind of, if you will, doubled up on that. And they said that that's great that they're doing that, but where are you going to play? So now they're investing in building 12 street hockey facilities in the Tampa Bay area. What that means is if you provide them with a slab, they will then spend about $125,000 on building you a street hockey court. We do not feel that that's enough, that's a successful model, that we believe that street hockey facility needs to be covered. So currently we're in conversations with our youth foundation, Clearwater for Youth, asking them to fund the covering part. And we're just now getting all the numbers together. So that's why we put this on hold, because as part of that overall project, that would go out front and that slab would be all part of the site work of that.
I believe Orlando has a few covered hockey facilities. Well, hockey, basketball.
Yeah, Oldsmar's currently doing, the two projects in Pinellas County right now are contemplated to be Oldsmar, which is under construction, and then Clearwater. They've done Lakewood Ranch, they have a covered facility over in Tampa and Hillsborough County. So they're working their way up through that. So, I mean, you're talking about a $500,000 facility. But we have staff in the Long Center that could program. Our goal would be to try to develop a street hockey program that eventually would become the city's 14th co-sponsor program, just like the other little leagues and things like that.
So you would not expand the parking there?
We would, no, we would. It's about a 60 by 120 foot area would be what the street hockey court would be.
Okay, so
The athletic fields,
you come in off of Golden Booth, you've got the little playground, and then you go up alongside the pool, go around the back, come down the back, except the old folks or
okay,
something.
so you come in off of Belcher,
Right.
and the fields in front of you would no longer be there.
Both of them would.
Correct.
Okay, and that would be parking.
Correct, and the street hockey facility would sit up there
Okay.
as
so-
part of that.
Okay, so
On the same
the
perimeter.
two fields that are up front.
Yeah, there won't be two fields. We'll have a grass area, that way our summer camp program and things like that have a grass area to go play on. The CAT program would have a place to do their agility outside, but it wouldn't be someplace where you could play football or soccer on. It would not be of that size.
I know.
All right. Sorry,
So one quick question. And on the other side of the Long Center, by Coachman, Old Coachman,
Coachman Ridge Park,
they removed the basketball courts and put 2 tennis courts now.
the tennis courts were always there.
They were always there?
Yeah,
Oh, that's right. They
the
were on
basketball court,
inside, right
yeah,
by
the basketball court
racquetball
was
court,
removed.
Or squash courts.
We're going to be putting back a half court of basketball
Half
in there. Kind of take you through that project just real quick. So next to the Carpenter Complex was the solid waste transfer station. Their new project has required them to do a series of mitigation. So engineering and solid waste approached us and said, hey, we'd like to do it at Coachman Ridge and basically build you a new park. So that's now the wet retention area that you see there, ties in with our trail system, all elements and components that we thought needed to be, and also kind of ties in with the Long Center. Matter of fact, we're probably gonna adjust the signage and call it Coachman Ridge Park at the Long Center, because it's another amenity now for the Long Center facility. So on the back of the one, on the back of the handball walls where we're gonna be putting the basketball court in, that project has not been completed yet. Engineering hasn't signed off yet. So there's a series of upgrades that Parks and Recreation was gonna do. That was one. The other one was putting a canopy over the playground. But we can't do it until the contractor releases the site to us.
Okay, yeah, I see the camera because I live right around, I live across the corner from it.
Okay,
And in the basketball court, the full one, we used to use it a lot. And there's one, so it's only going to be a half.
it'd be a half, yes. Yeah, it'd be a half.
Okay.
All right, next is the Barefoot Beach House men's restroom. That is upgrades to the kind of rundown and much needed improvements to the men's restroom on Beach Walk at the Barefoot Beach House concession. That is starting soon. This should be updated from April 2019. It actually should be started September/October of this year and completed by February. Next page is a women's restroom at Philip Jones Field.
Wait, do you mind, so in our last meeting, we actually asked about what was being upgraded to the men's restroom and what was the issue. Could you share that with us?
Sure, I can tell you my brief version, or I think Kevin may be able to give us a more in-depth thing since this is all.
Yep, so here's what we did. We have, as we've reworked some of our contracts, we've removed some of the old 5 or 6 pack restroom facilities, and we've put the responsibility on our vendors or our operators. And so Barefoot Beach House, the first phase was, we went, I think, from 5 fixtures in the women's bathroom to 13 to increase capacity. Because those buildings sit in the floodplain and they're in some kind of a coastal construction zone, we are only able to do minimal amount of work each year based on FEMA regulations. So we have done the women's side, we have not done the men's side yet. And so now, so we went to go do the men's side last year. We have the money for this. We went to go do the men's side. Irma happened. The roof was damaged. And we thought it was more of an R&R piece. FEMA then said, no, that was an upgrade you did to the facility. So the dollar value went against what we were doing and we weren't able to start the work. So we will be upgrading the men's side similar to the women's side. Not really adding, I think maybe adding one more urinal. But really just, cleaning it up. One of the things we look at is when you look at Clearwater Beach and Beach Walk and the high amenity that it is, having a communal outhouse kind of sitting out front is really not the amenity that you probably want to be known by. So we have made sure that we have significantly upgraded because all of our restrooms, and we did the same thing at Pier 60 at the concession when we added on to that. By doing that, because it's tied to food service, the standard of cleanliness then goes up significantly. That's a burden that we've put on the vendor or our operator of those facilities. But what happens is our visitors, our citizens get the big impact from that.
Thank you.
The women's restroom at Philip Jones Field. This is again, is in a floodplain, so we've been chipping away at pieces of the building every year. Unfortunately, not able.
Does everybody know how that works, by the way? When you deal with FEMA, so you're able to do 50% of the depreciated value of the building. So if your building's worth, say, $100,000 is the value, but the depreciated value is $60,000, you can only do $30,000 worth of work in a year. Doesn't matter how much money you have. That's probably a fairly close analogy, by the way, to Philip Jones. So try doing anything for $30,000 and see how far you get. So I think we're in the 4th or 5th year of Philip Jones, and we're just sitting on the money, but we have to go through that. Mr. Delk, when he was the planning director, one time said to me, he said, if it appears that FEMA does not want you to rebuild the building in the area, it's because they don't. So that, yeah, so if you're going to do it, you're going to go through this painstaking process. You could build it there, but you've got to go elevate up, and there's all these other things that you have to do.
So the estimated completion there is February of 2020. Next is the Seminole boat ramps, the restroom at the Seminole boat ramps. That design is complete and is waiting for building permits. Next, lighting at Morningside Tennis and Morningside Basketball Courts. That is, we're hoping to be finished with that in December of this year. The drawings have come back and waiting for a building permit on that as well. Next, another lighting project, McMullen Tennis Courts. That is to provide LED lighting to upgrade the lighting for the existing courts to match the new courts that was just installed. And that is, where are we with that? That is still in design. Consultants to move forward with 60% drawings, so we don't have a completion date for the construction until we get the final design and apply for permits and all that. The Ross Norton pool resurfacing and renovations. That's again just basic repair and replacement of elements of the pool deck and the pump station and all that kind of stuff. That is expected to be completed in May of next year. Countryside Rec Center and Long Center hardwood flooring. This is replacing the entire floor in the gymnasiums of both of those facilities. Those we are, continue to move forward with those. We're going to meet with the building plans and review committee with planning and development, and once we get their permission, move forward with permitting and hope to be completed there again next spring by April or May of 2020. The next item is a standing item of grant coordination. We don't have any outstanding grants that have come in, but we continue to look for them. Next, the Reed Wilson Trail Channel A section. This is the bridge and section of the trail at Northeast Coachman Park, as the trail goes alongside on the west side of Old Coachman Road. So if you were to drive north from Drew Street on Old Coachman Road, there's a very narrow bridge. As you're driving, this is the bicycle and pedestrian trail just to the west of that. That bridge is, well, it's old, but it's also very narrow. If two bicycles are going opposite directions, it's quite dangerous. So that's actually a county project that's currently a little bit delayed, somewhat due to the Duke Energy line work that's going on there along Old Coachman Road. So that should be started soon. Next is Cooper's Point. This is our engineering department. The city's engineering department is working on this. They have been working with FDOT as well as a number of other Port Tampa Bay and some other agencies that need environmental credits for the work that they're doing. So there is a potential, this may take some time to develop, but there's a potential that we may get a significant amount of funding to achieve the elements that we want to achieve, the city wants to achieve in Cooper's Point with funding from outside organizations like Port Tampa Bay and FDOT, because they need the credits that we would get for doing that work, for improvements to, say, mangroves and seagrass and all that kind of stuff, the environment.
I went out and saw the park.
Okay.
The engineer took a small group out with the environmental board.
Good.
I went representing Parks and Rec and got a full tour and an understanding of the dredging of Cooper Bayou and the cut through in front of the medical school. And
yeah, there are a number of really, really interesting elements that our environmental engineering folks have worked on to help flush out the Cooper's Bayou, which is currently becoming totally filled up with silt, and this will help restore the original kind of tidal flushing of the area. So.
This is potentially the coolest project that we'll do in my tenure here. Basically bringing the life back to that area. There's a variety of different elements that are going to do this. Our briefing today, we're looking at probably about $25–30 million worth of upgrades, but to rehydrate and bring the life back to that area.
Yeah, they said that just the dredging could be $25 million.
The original budget was about $55 million. Sarah's telling us that probably $25–30 million is the work they're going to do. They're not going to do everything. But if you want to see how nature comes back, for those who remember Kapok Mobile Home Park, that's now Kapok Park. That will tell you how man can create or can make up for their mistakes.
And they've been working on Cooper's Point for a very long time. It just kept getting dead-ended, didn't it?
Yeah, and it's a funding issue. See, what Mike was talking about was that there's a series of groups, in many cases, large governmental agencies that have work that they want to get done and they want to achieve. And they've got mitigation pieces that they have to handle. We would be an accepting donor of that towards doing these improvements, because this is considered one of the greatest needs, the saving of Old Tampa Bay.
So the mitigation would be for the mangroves that are being
No.
Cooper Bayou is silted in.
If I can explain that. So Port Tampa Bay wants to do something, they need to expand part of their thing, but it's going to take up some portion of the existing bed of Tampa Bay. They would have to pay for essentially what would be considered the environmental damage by their project. They could pay the city of Clearwater to make, within the Tampa Bay region, they can pay for significant environmental upgrades to another area to mitigate the potential changes that they've made somewhere else. So they would give us money for us to achieve our project, and that would allow them to also do their project.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Next is our capital improvements for purchasing of fitness equipment. That the Long Center received new equipment, and it looks great. We have no ongoing land acquisition projects at this time. We were just talking about that earlier today. Back in the 60s and 70s, that was a big thing, but now it's not. The city's so built out at this time, we don't often have big opportunities for land acquisition. And then finally, our Adopt a Park programs continue to. We continue to reach out with that. We also recently hired a new volunteer coordinator following the departure of the former staff members, so she's on board and doing great. We currently have 31 Adopt a Park agreements, 5 Adopt a Trail agreements, and 9 Adopt a Street agreements. And that is the...
Where would someone find out about adopting program this?
Yeah, so that is coordinated by the new volunteer coordinator. Her name is Felicia Sabardinelli.
Contact her.
Yeah, so if you want to send me an email, I can get you in touch with her. Make a note of that.
Yep.
So the second item under Director's Report, moving on, I would like to handed out this document here. Yeah, and I'm gonna hand it over to the director here. This came up recently. I'll let Kevin introduce it. This is what you have in front of you, what you're about to have in front of you is the sections of the city code that reference the specific responsibilities of this board. So this will be, I'll let Ms. Dunbar introduce it, and then we can open it up to a group discussion.
Before you introduce it,
Yes.
you know you're introducing this because of my complaints, don't you?
That's a yes and a no.
Just so that you don't brush over my concerns and whitewash them,
Well, I'll try not to.
okay?
How's that?
Because I would like to be heard, because obviously I was concerned enough to go to both the mayor, to Rosemary Call, then the mayor, and then the city manager over this.
So the Parks and Recreation Board was created in 1962. And what you have in front of you is the powers and duties of the Parks and Recreation Board as they were established in 1962. So think about 50.
That's Rose. Was that
Yeah, well, yeah, the powers and duties part was from 1962.
That's as per the city clerk.
That's per the city clerk this afternoon, yes.
I gave her the information.
Okay.
The 1962 had no rules of nothing in it, it just said we started.
So, but, well, 1962, 1980. So think about as a society where we were, and things, you know, we didn't have technology, we didn't have those kind of things. Michael had mentioned about how, you know, Clearwater, Countryside wasn't even a part of Clearwater then. So the city was developing, and so those were basically the powers and tasks that were provided, you know, to the board at that time. One of my favorite things to do is every quarter, I go to lunch still with Reem Wilson. And for those who don't know who that is, other than the trail's named after him, that's my predecessor. And to hear the stories about how back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and into the 90s, how and why they did certain things and acquired certain things. The reason we named the trail after Reem was because he's the one that had the vision to acquire all the properties when they were acquirable, when they were affordable at that period of time. But what's changed? We're all built out now. Mike just went through 30 or so projects. They're all repair and replacement projects. We're not building new facilities. We're doing repair and replacement. And when you look at the duties and the responsibilities of what currently exists for the board, you know, we give you updates on the R&R stuff. Technology didn't exist. You know, some of the information, if we wait till quarterly meetings, you know, I did the Parks and Rec Board for 15 years, and we used to be monthly. Well, now it's quarterly. Well, the way technology is today and the way people react, everything's instantaneous. So really kind of the idea of as I attempt not to whitewash, is to kind of look at the duties and responsibilities and to say, do you all think they need to be adjusted? Do you think there's a different role or a different place, and that we address these here? Because the way things have changed over time, what was important 20 years ago in terms of you all being out in the community and noticing something, you know, give you an example. And this example I gave the city manager today. You know, 25 years ago, you went out, you looked at sites, and then you reported that, hey, I was at Del Oro Park and the swings broke. Well, we have 5 certified playground inspectors on staff now that every Friday, that's their job to go out and do that. We didn't have the resources back then to do those things. So those were some of the things that the board, you know, the board did at those times. So really, as everything has changed over time, you know, so too, you know, does it make sense? Because I think, to your point, why do we meet? What are we here for? What are we doing? What's that?
That's not actually.
Okay, well, but it's, kind of, where's value? Because you're an advisory board to the mayor and council, and the items on here that it says to provide us with input with, people send us emails every day. That's part of Mike's job. He gets everything through the city's email system. So all citizens, non-residents, visitors, they're all reaching out in constant communication with us. So it's really more of to say, what is a better defining role? That makes sense, because the last thing we want to do is the most valuable thing all of us have is time, and is to waste your time by being here. But to really make this be a valuable experience so that you're able to really participate to the level and the information that you want. That, in Mike's case, and Jim Halios before that, and Felicia Donnelly before that, and before that, that's the staff liaison that's been assigned to this board. But they're a liaison. Their job is not to lead the board. Their job is to facilitate for the board. So.
And your concern, Ms. Langley?
May I spend a few minutes discussing what brought my issue? Last October, I live in Del Oro Groves, right by Del Oro Park. A number of my neighbors in October came to me and said that there were 3 contiguous swales in the park that had completely filled in and were breeding mosquitoes and making it difficult for people in the neighborhood, not just Del Oro, but Sunfish Bay and some other communities, to use the park. And so I called Jim Halios and I explained the swales had filled in and we needed them dug out. Never heard back from him. Never. So in the January meeting, when Mike was being introduced and Jim was here, I brought it up in the meeting, and it's in the meeting minutes, the swales need to be dug out. One of the 3 contiguous swales was dug out. The other 2 were not. They weren't touched at all. So I called Mike after the April meeting, and I did bring it up in the April meeting, and went a fairly long conversation with you, explaining where they were and they needed to be dug out. I didn't hear back. At the same time, this is when the salt marsh mosquitoes came out, and my neighbors began to just go nuts, and I was taking pretty upsetting phone calls. So was the president. I'm also, by the way, the vice president of the HOA. So I was taking hateful phone calls. The president was also. At the same time, in the last meeting, what I understood you to say that Rosemary Call had said to you was that unless we did something, we shouldn't have a meeting. That was what I heard. I know Rosemary Call. So I phoned her and I said, "Is that what you said?" And she said, "Not really. It's really that the liaison and you as a board should be working more so that the meetings are have more meat to them, because for us to drive all the way from our homes over here, it's disrespectful to make us come all the way here to have a 15-minute meeting to go through this and turn around and drive home." So I was dismayed when I heard Rosemary. What Rosemary said to me was not what I heard you say to me, Mike, or to say to the board. That concerned me. In my discussion with Rosemary, I said, what do I do? Because I've got my swales issue. Nobody's addressed it. It's been in the meeting minutes. Obviously, Kevin, you never read the meeting minutes. Brian DeWitt was not given the meeting minutes. Nothing was done about them. And yet, I brought them up 3 times, nothing done. So Rosemary said, well, contact the mayor. I did. I had a sit-down face-to-face meeting with the mayor about the issue, i.e. Parks and Rec, and the issue with the swales. Parks and Rec, he said, we have a 10-year plan in place. We don't want your opinions. The whole board. We're not interested in your opinions. You're just ambassadors. To whom? What ambassadors to whom? Do we go to the schools and tell kids to go use Eddie Seymour Park? What? He didn't have an answer to that. He said, that's your role. That sort of means we have no purpose. On the swales, he said, have the president of your HOA write a letter to me She did. Next thing you know, Brian DeWitt's in that park within days, along with a gentleman named Mike from Utilities, because it doesn't, the swales don't belong to you, they belong to Utilities.
They belong to stormwater, yes.
Right, thank you. Within days, those things were dug out. But I had come to you 3 times and had heard nothing from anybody. Nobody called me back, nobody did anything. My president of the HOA contacts the mayor, and all of a sudden we get something done. But I'm on the Parks and Rec board, and no one paid me the courtesy of a call back. And it would have taken so little effort to get in touch with Brian DeWitt and have him just say, well, that's not ours. And I questioned him at length, because he came to the park along with a gentleman named Mike. I said, this is when I contacted. Did you hear that? No. Did you hear that? Are you sure you didn't? Yes, he said, I'm positive. Had I done it, I would have told you immediately. Doesn't belong to us.
And Jim knew that, and Jim shared that with the stormwater folks, and they didn't react.
No, that Mike said he'd never heard anything.
Well, he might not have, but they're a department of about 60 people, so
Nothing was done.
they might have,
But I wasn't told anything, and I brought it to the January meeting, and nobody corrected me at that point and said we did something. Had I been told it was stormwater, I would have called stormwater.
Well, you shouldn't have to. It's just like we talked about a couple items today that are not Parks and Rec.
But if I had been told it wasn't Parks and Rec, I would have carried it forward as my role as the vice president of the neighborhood association.
Yeah, and not being here, it's hard for me to say who woulda, shoulda, doulda.
I know.
Jim doesn't even work for us any longer.
I know that. I'm aware of that.
He's over in he's over in a different department now. But typically, how it works for kind of every other citizen is that they contact the city. Typically, it's electronically anymore. It's by an email. It goes in our document system, and then it goes through and it gets to the right person, and then they sign off on it and say it's completed. That's kind of one of my points with kind of this group. When you only meet quarterly, then stuff sits and waits for 3 months. Just the way stuff is today, there's just faster ways of doing things and getting it done. To be honest with you, as soon as I found out about it, that's why you met with Brian. Because I tasked Brian with going out, to go out to meet, to go solve it. I said, bring the right person with you from Stormwater, because we knew it was them, and then come to what the solution was. And that.
Sad it had to come to that.
If I could just add a little bit to Kevin's response to Ms. Langley. I see two errors here on the part of city staff. First is, I brought it to Stormwater when you called me about it. We talked extensively about it. You told me exactly how far you had to walk into the park, where it was. So I brought that and I gave it to the Stormwater division. And their failure to follow up on it is the first problem. The second one is my error in not responding to you and letting you know what I found out, and giving you the tools that you would need as a citizen to follow up on it, which I also should have done. But so my apologies for that.
And this is what concerns me. I feel like we're on the board, we're an advisory board. I'm here because we have 109 parks. I have been to all of them, from the revenue generating parks to that weird piece of scrub on Lake Chautauqua. Every one of them.
It's by my house.
I think it's great. It's for birds or whatever.
It's got bobcats in it. They're running through our neighborhood right now.
But I know. But that's what I'm saying, is the variety of parks we have, I love that. I love that we have something as fancy as Countryside or Eddie Seymour Park, and something for a bird or a bobcat or whatever. I think that's what makes Clearwater special. That's why I'm on this board. And yet, the longer I'm on the board, I feel like Mike, Jim Halios, and you treat us dismissively. You treat us with a lack of courtesy and respect. It's frustrating to be on this board and be treated like you really don't want us to be here. You're not interested in things we ask. We hear back almost nothing. It's as if we don't exist. You're coming here because you've told the city the residents of the city of Clearwater that there is a Parks and Rec board, therefore you're keeping us around, but you honestly don't want us here. That's the way I feel you treat the board. And it's very frustrating, and that's why I took it to the mayor, I took it to Rosemary Call, and I took it to Bill Horn, because that's the way I feel. If you don't want us, get rid of us. Otherwise, we'd love to do something. We'd like to go to Spectrum Field. We went to Jack C. Russell. That's the last thing we've done. These things, they interest me. Interest me to enough to spend a significant amount of my personal time going to every single park and trying to learn about it.
And we appreciate that, but to get back to, I think, the point that Mike was trying to make at the April meeting, exactly what you just said, that's what you all are supposed to be talking about. This is what we want to do. This is the information we want. Can you help to facilitate that as a liaison? Mike's point was it's not his job, or it's not his role. I didn't say it's not his job. It's not his role to guide you along to show you what it is that he thinks that he wants you to see. It's yours to talk about what you want, what's important to you to help to facilitate. I do think, though, that the powers and duties description here is woefully out of date. I think that is a task that the board at a future meeting can take on to make recommendations back to the council. Just like, Member Marlowe has been here for a while, and I believe, Noreen, you were here for when we did the update to the master plan. And the Parks and Rec Board was front and center involved in that. That is our guiding document.
Right.
That is how we determine what we're going to do over the next 10 years, and we're in year 6. I think what the mayor was trying to say is we need you to advocate for that in the community, because that's how we get support.
Right.
Yeah, there are roughly 36 items that are in there. I think about a dozen of them have funding attached to them. We have 24 that don't have funding.
Right.
And so how are we going to move forward, and how are we going to do those things? Those are the type things.
So seeing that, like you said earlier about, being a digital age, and since
Yes.
we meet every 90 days, it is kind of out of touch. I think we should update a little bit. I don't mind if we can find out a way to communicate and be more interactive, so when things do happen, maybe some way, not a CRM system, but something where there's accountability. Okay, someone received it, someone should, like a ticketing where now we can interact, or we speak with our community, we go to places and we can interact, not wait 90 days, or unfortunately on my behalf, I wasn't in the last meeting, so it's 6 months from the last time I saw everyone. So it's unfortunate to have that much of a disconnect, and then I think that's where things get missed, because then if nothing gets touched in 90 days, and you have to wait another 90, I mean, by then it's already a year for something that could have been taken care of in a week with the right information.
Sure.
But isn't it policy that we have to be in front of each other to actually have a conversation?
Well, that's something that we want to address by looking at this document here. And if I could just first address this Langley's comments about what I presented at the April meeting. So I would like to put together our agenda, which is one of your agenda, which is one of my roles, which all the items have to be entered a certain number of weeks before. And so I called the city clerk and I said, I don't have any items to put on the agenda.
I asked for one. I called when we were in our conversation, I asked for one. And you said, well, Kevin will be here, that'll be handled. Not on the agenda.
You were talking about the April meeting.
Yeah.
He was talking about the April
Okay,
meeting.
sorry, this meeting.
Right, so I called the city clerk and I asked, well, what is the, what do I do? I don't have any items that have been brought to me to be put on the agenda. I want some clarification on what my role is, and how to move forward with this. And the answer was, I presume the city clerk went and looked at, well, what is the role of the board, what is the staff's role in terms of doing that? And if you read this, and this is what I would like very much for the board to review very closely and think a lot about, we'll have a discussion about it at the next meeting, is if you read this, the powers and duties, the long paragraph at the end there, this very specifically spells out that the board, consults and advises the city manager and other municipal officers, that's the director, myself, the city manager, the Parks and Recreation Department, regarding the physical condition of, improvements on, and beautification of the public parks and playgrounds. So that to me says there's a broken bench over here, there's a broken swing over there, which may not any longer be relevant in a quarterly meeting in the age of email and cell phones and all these things. So these are just things to think about. Moving forward, shall serve an advisory capacity in connection with all public parks, parkways, playgrounds, athletic fields, bathing beaches, and all other property owned or controlled by the city and used for public purposes. Okay, so that part says an advisory capacity for all of our parks, if things should be used in a different way, I suppose, or changed. And finally, shall make recommendations regarding the development of city property as public parks and playgrounds, and shall submit reports to the city commission regarding their recommendations. That last part to me reads very much about the master plan. Recommendations about what the city should do, developing city property. And what we talked about today with, in the staff meeting today with the city manager was that this piece of the ordinance, which whether it was 1962 or 1980, is doesn't keep this board as a relevant body to what its function should be today. So, Ms. Lang, we're not here to whitewash your comments, but I actually want to highlight them and to figure out how we can actually make this board a useful body. Should it change in terms of the way that it meets? If this, any ordinance changes, of course, have to go to the city council, goes through them. Is this a board that goes to being an advisory board on the master plan that comes together within the years, just a couple of years leading up to that, or what? And Kevin, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, matter of fact, that was exactly one of the concepts that we talked about. Is it's a 10-year master plan. Do we every 2 years do we look to do a refresh? Is that something for the board to look at? So those are all kind of parts of the conversation. But I know it's getting late now. But I think that's actually work to kind of get your teeth into in terms of defining. You heard me talk earlier about baseball and how the game of Major League Baseball's changed, and a lot of it's been based on technology. When we all went to school, they talked about the Industrial Revolution. Now I suppose in school they talk about the technological revolution. It's completely changed our lives, and so we're still operating off of a old set of guidance and pretty vague guidance, by what Mike just read, but really talking about how does the board, evolve. Does it need to meet quarterly? Does it need to meet more often? Does it need to meet less often? But is there a technology piece for how everybody stays interconnected to really maximize the utilization of everybody's time? I applaud you because I think you and I and Art Cater may be the only 3 people that have been to all 109 parks. That is possible, and he had 40 years to do it. So.
I personally am involved in several other groups, and information is instant. We have bylaws that say, okay, this is the way we communicate for things as far as being open and transparent, and then we do meet regularly, but then we also communicate regularly.
Yeah, we have to deal with the fact that Florida and the sunshine, and those are things that we'll have to talk about.
You can just do that by contacting Mike and Mike forwarding any contact you have with him to all the board members. And then if you want to respond, you respond to Mike and then forward. It has to come through, everybody has to get the same.
And does it always have to be in writing? Because Mike, I asked you for an agenda item on this one, and it didn't appear when Lynette sent out the agenda. I contacted her and I said, I don't see this one item. She said she had not received it from you. So it's still not on here?
Yeah, we had spoken about that. I did, when I was putting this agenda together, I looked at the minutes from the last meeting and they slipped my mind, so I apologize about that. I do hope that you'll bring it up during the board members to be heard, which is the very next item after this.
Yes. And that's with the fraud case, the gentleman that the $150,000 for the fraud. When Jim Hellers explained that to us, he went through it very quickly.
Yes, I was going to say.
If we're done with the one conversation, then we can go there.
Sorry, okay.
Yeah, let's finish up the so I'm not sure exactly what the conversation is going to look like. You are the board, and this is your discussion.
But I would suggest for your next meeting, if you would like to have Mr. Delk here, he'll talk about Imagine Clearwater.
Yes.
And then the other item you would agenda would be this conversation about powers and duties.
Okay.
And to really get into it, and that'll allow us to do a little more research to be able to answer, some of the procedural questions about how we can do things, if that makes sense.
Just a quick comment. I know, having been on this board quite a while now, new people would come on and go, we don't do anything. We sit here, we listen to the presentation, which in the past, we kind of changed that, like, let's go through it. If you have any questions, we'll ask you, instead of going through each line item. So you're saving time that way. But to me, what Jennifer brought today, this is what I feel like we should be doing. She's got concerns, she's the garbage, the transportation, and all that. And we're trying to make sure, like you're saying, well, maybe it's the cart before the horse. Well, to you and maybe to me, no, it should be before the horse, because you're not thinking about it and you're going to take care of it after the fact, if you can, or whatever's left. But to me, that's what we're supposed to be doing, is thinking ahead and trying to take care of things that might concern the public during the process. Instead of waiting till it's over, now what do we do? That's
What would be helpful though is
trying to be proactive. And
what would be helpful
thoughtful.
though is get that information in advance, so that it can be agendaed, so that to some degree we're just not sitting here playing catch.
Right.
Sitting here like this because we can't answer every question. I mean, the reality is, for those who don't know, we're over a $30 million budget that has over 400 employees. So, Mike's not going to know everything. I'm not going to know everything. So, information.
I think the board is here, like I said, to make recommendations. And over the years, we have, we would have our chair, the board would agree. Do we all agree on this particular thing to be done? And the chair would write the letter and send it to the mayor and city council, or to you, or whomever we sent.
No, that's the mayor and council. That is the part about advising the mayor and council, because that's the way you would go about doing that. Yes.
And when we do that, I think that makes you feel like you're doing something in this capacity.
Correct.
Not just sitting here and going, and not to undermine your projects, because you have a lot of projects.
Yeah.
But, do we need to know every detail in every project? Probably not, unless the board decides that they want to know.
But I would tell you this, I think it's important, we had, off of that sheet, we had a 5 or 10 minute conversation about the biggest project that the city's ever going to do financially, Spectrum Field. And it is very helpful to just get your comments. That's important to us. Kind of same thing about, talking for a couple of minutes about Cooper's Point, Cooper's Bayou. Again, what's out there, so you're aware of the vast variety of things that are going on, and that you can provide some input that may help to, sometimes you don't realize the input that you have and how it changes how things move
Well, I think
forward.
that's what the board feels like. You want to have your input, because that's why we're spending our time here, because we feel we have something to give.
Oh,
I think it would help. I went to Cooper's Point, so I'm very familiar, and I met with Sarah. And she spent a lot of time with me talking about the dredging, talking about the tunnel.
The mosquito ditches?
No. What's going to go under Courtney Campbell? Potential for that.
Yeah, the same thing that's on the east side.
Correct.
On the Tampa.
That they may reproduce that there, and the little culvert, the little bridge into the medical school, and all of it. She walked us through everything. We went back and looked at every bird and plant. It was wonderful to have her spend the time. But that was with the environmental board, and I just asked if I could go along because someone I knew in the city said, "Oh, I'll bet you'll be interested in that because you live right near it."
And we used to do field trips. And then the board said it didn't want to do field trips.
But we do want
I
to.
never heard that.
No,
Well, that's,
no,
That may have been
that's
at
not
that
true.
time.
back when we used to try to do 2 field trips a year.
I wanted to. I mean, I spent the time going to every
I've
park.
never heard that.
The only one I didn't go into Cooper's Point because they wouldn't let me
When you
in.
got on, I stopped coming. When you got on, I stopped coming.
So I guess going forward, maybe we can figure out a way between us to find out a way to be more interactive. to be more informed and kind of, that we don't have to wait as long, and maybe some of these points can be at least, maybe not immediately addressed, but at least formalized so that we can address them as a group later on and inform and go back to the community and tell them, okay, this is what we got at this point without having to wait 90, 120 months, 120
By the way, nobody else in the city waits that long,
When you,
wherever it is, because of the way the systems work.
when you went to just reviewing this and we stopped going to parks, our ability to have input disappeared because we're just looking at a spreadsheet. When we go to parks, when I went to Cooper's Point, I visually saw and understood the problems. Sarah explained them to me. I'd like to go to the Spectrum Field because I think that would give me an understanding of what your issues are and why you want to spend $75 million. That gives me the ability as a spectator to make comments from the community without having seen it. I can't provide any intelligent comments.
Why we should do it. By the way, just so you know, that spreadsheet's not created for you. That's my working spreadsheet.
I know.
That I meet with the staff, and then we provide
Yeah.
that working document to you. I just want to make sure everybody was.
No, we know that.
Okay.
But the point is that it's, I think part of, it's not just that when I ask for help, I get no response. It's we go over this and I feel like you're just droning through it and you don't want us to know anything about this stuff and you want us to shut up, be quiet, listen to it and leave. That's the impression I've got.
Did you get that impression today?
No, but that's because you're here and because I've already filed a complaint and I've made enough of a stir that you've decided to pay attention to us. That's the impression I get.
No,
And I'm not,
Okay,
please understand,
but that's fine. No,
Mr.
you're entitled to your opinion.
I know, but I'm not usually this combative. I'm pretty much known as a very easygoing person, but y'all have sort of pushed me to the end of my rope, especially because I love these parks so much. And I hate the fact that I went on the board with heart and soul lying to help and be involved and feel like I've been treated so badly.
And this is not the only board, because I've heard this from other board members of other boards. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, goodbye.
Well,
And that's not what.
but in fairness to that, right, all the other boards meet during the daytime. Guess what? This guy ain't getting paid to be here tonight. He's a
daytime board.
Yeah, no, but he's a salaried employee. He don't get paid to be here tonight.
And I
yet
wouldn't want to
yet-
give him more work, but if there was something that came up that you could use our input, you could email us.
Sure, well, this being my second meeting as the liaison, that's why I brought this forward, to try to address why this is the problem. This says that you bring things to me, and this is my second meeting, and I sent an email out and said, please, somebody give me something to put on the agenda.
But I called you,
You don't have anything, and that was my mistake.
and you didn't put it on there.
Okay, well, but I think he's already covered that. He made a mistake.
I know.
Okay.
But you can understand my frustration. One thing after another after another.
And all I can tell you is,
Yeah, it does.
we you know, trying to focus on moving forward. We've kind of laid out what I think is a good path
Okay.
to move forward, and I hope everybody is singing Kumbaya and ready to move forward.
Please send me an email, and because I remember that.
Well, you know,
I forwarded it to me.
is there still the email issue going on that used to go on, that if there is not an email generated from a city employee, like if I just sent it, like I'm kind of linked into yours, I guess, but I've had ones that I've sent and they never get back to me because you go to the spam or whatever, and then they go and look at their spam sheet 3 days later and see that so-and-so contacted them.
Well, they're not supposed to look at them 3 days later. They're suped to be, because your spam stuff.
I'm just telling you what I recollect, because I would never get responses.
And my
So you
question-
could be being spammed, and how would you know?
No, but I called.
Because you're supposed to, because we're supposed to look at our spam folders, because,
As in daily,
oh, like as in a couple of times a day.
a couple times a day? Well, I imagine there are people that do not.
And anything that says Noreen that comes on mine, all right?
That's right.
I respond.
Flags.
Big red flashing letters.
Okay,
So to move forward,
yep.
board members to be heard.
I think everybody's heard me by now.
Wait, but you had an item,
We
you
did
had
have
a-
some,
the
yes,
last
the other
item.
item.
The one thing I asked Mike later about was when Jim Halios talked to us about the fraud case. He went through it very quickly, very efficiently. The one thing that I did not get a sense of is you had financial fraud going on for 5 years. And yet, cash controls in the retail world, in the banking world, those controls have been around for, what, 50 to 100 years? And yet, for some reason, they didn't work for y'all. What have you done to correct that? What cash controls are in place so we can say, this is never going to happen again? Because it seems to have been, oh, it happened, only 150,000, no worries, it's done, we're taking care of it.
Well,
that seemed to me to be a very flippant
see, I'd significantly disagree with that characterization.
I know, but that's
Okay.
when I was
let
hearing it was said so quickly.
yeah, okay, but let me finish now.
Okay,
The department found problem.
right,
The individual was arrested. The
Right.
individual is in jail and will be in jail for another year.
right.
His supervisor, who was responsible to make sure that those things were done correctly, after 19 years, lost his employment with the city. Another employee who helped to cover up one of the deposits does not work for the city any longer. The city manager did not get an increase this year in salary. The deputy city manager did not get an increase in salary. I did not get an increase in salary for it. And quite frankly, I've had a perfect record with the city for 38 years. I have a letter of admonishment in my file, but because of those acts, as well as our assistant director does. So to say that we just did this and walked away, a lot of people took a very significant hit. Now, here's the reality. Here's what happened. The individual started in the beginning of not making the deposits. We have large buckets of money because, again, a large department. He was a supervisor. He was responsible for collecting it and putting it in. His coordinator was responsible for making sure that that happened. It didn't happen, but as long as that bucket balanced, if you will, from year to year, it didn't show any anomalies.
Right.
What actually happened was we had, that bucket happened to be a large bucket that had athletics and events as part of the bucket. So you're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. So 150,000 over 5 years doesn't really stand out. We split that bucket up into athletics and events. And the athletic side did not come out like we thought it would. We started the review, and the first review was, where was the concession revenue? Then what we learned is the individual was actually going out and collecting cash from rental of facilities, but not putting them on the books in the system in our cash handling. And made sure that no one else, and if they had a problem, if somebody else showed up for the field, would be the point of contact, would go out and resolve the issue. His supervisor actually knew that. He didn't know that he wasn't he knew they weren't going in, he didn't know that there wasn't the cash going in. So that's what we learned as we went through, the process. 400 employees, I will tell you the day that I talked to him, I told him he'd be one of the last 5 that I would think would do something like that. He'd been with the department a long time. The reality is that he did.
Question
And
now.
he's paying the ultimate sacrifice for it.
Are there any other departments, any other situations where this could happen? If it happened in that department, are there any other?
Well,
areas
yeah,
where-
the problem with us is, and it's one of the things in terms of changes that we've made, no longer do we accept cash in the field. No longer are we to accept cash in the field. One of the areas that we were concerned about was, one of the worst programs you can run is adult baseball.
Yeah,
Those guys, it's hard to collect any money from them. And so you're going out literally before the game saying you're not playing unless, so everybody kind of takes 20 bucks out of their pocket and.
Not my team, but.
Yeah, but
Yes,
now
yes.
you're set up that those kind of things can happen. Now they're outfitted with iPads, with squares on them. And, somebody's either producing a credit card or it's not happening. But there are specific areas only where we will accept cash so that those things do not happen. The last thing I can share with you we've done is that, most of our people are Parks and Rec people. They're not finance people.
Right.
We have put finance people in place. We now have a comptroller whose job it is to make sure that all the finance and policies and procedures are being followed. 5 years ago, we didn't even have, we had an accountant who didn't actually have an accounting degree that was in the position. We now have 2 CPAs within the department to go and check and to make sure that we are following all those processes and procedures.
That's really all I wanted to hear, is to understand that you had reacted and done something, because I wasn't comfortable, and I just needed that answer.
Well, let me put it this way, so they told me it was a Wednesday. They told me at 11 o'clock. And at that point, the story was, and the money was put in the McMullen Tennis Center. Okay, so we're trying to ascertain that. We just kind of came across this yesterday afternoon, and we confronted them about it. At 2 o'clock, I asked the question of the assistant director. I said, where are we at? He said, they're still trying to locate where the money went into the tennis center. I said, I want everybody in my office. I want everybody in my office now. So they all came in. I said, you guys go in the conference room. You don't come back out until you tell me one or two things. You found where the money is? And this included the employee. You found out where the money is? Or you tell me you can't find where the money is. But until then, no one's going home. You know what I did next? What do you think I did next? Called the chief of police. Because I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
And I told him what was going on, and we were giving I was giving the employee the opportunity to come out, but I said, but this is not good. So he was already ramping up. Because guess what? We as city employees, we don't turn it over to the police, they investigate and they give it back to us. We give it to them and they run with it at that point. And then what happens, happens. So when I made that phone call, you know, as soon as I told him, you know, we can't figure this out, they're onto it, and then whatever happens, including who goes to jail, who loses their career, you know, the whole bit over that, all happens when that decision's made. That decision was made within the first 3 or 4 hours.
That's reassuring, because in my employment history, what you just described was not unusual I worked for General Electric, and that's the way they did things. The first you knew that somebody had done something wrong was when the police came into the building to haul them away.
Yeah, and in his case, he went home that night. He emphatically told me at the end of the day, everybody said they couldn't find it. He goes, I don't understand it. We gave him all the paperwork and said, I'll meet you back here at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Show me where. He didn't show up. Yeah, that's what happened, and then police ran with it from there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That reassures me. I was not comfortable because I didn't get an answer, and my question was, what have you done so that this never happens again? You've changed your accounting. You've got accountants. You've got this. So that's very reassuring to me. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other comments, questions, or concerns?
And it's going to be brief, but going back to sending Michael agenda items, in which I did, on 6/28, my agenda items were almost made it to our meeting today. One lacking was, again, and I'm going to bring it up again, the Clearwater Beach trash removal. I feel like we still have not addressed that. And when I say that, I have an email going back to May with Brian DeWitt, and we actually had a phone conversation, and I forwarded that information.
Do you have a way out?
Phone at the door.
I mean, because when we lock out, you have to have a security key.
I have a key.
Yeah, I have a key too.
You have a key,
Yeah, and I
because
have
they
a key
were saying you
too.
didn't have a security guard, so you know how to get out.
We'll go out the side door over here, Pat. Yeah, well, that's not my problem. And I apologize, because you said that before, and I did
Well,
not.
it didn't make the meeting minute.
And I did not address. So here's what we've done over the last couple of years. The beach staff used to work from 7 o'clock in the morning until, I'm sorry, from 5:30 in the morning until 1:30. And then they went home, and whatever happened, happened. 2.5 years ago, we changed it. We went, and then on Saturday, we had 2 people in. And all they did was just empty the trash barrels. That's all they did. 2 years ago, we went to 10-hour work days. So we went to 4 10-hour work days. So we expanded our days from 5:30 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now we're seeing, because of the increased demand, we're holding over 2 to 4 employees on selected days to continue to handle trash up until about 6 o'clock every day. So we have done a lot of things in terms of addressing the fact that we're America's #1 beach, that we are building more hotels than any place else, and that we are adding more and more people to the beach in order to keep it cleaned up. This past weekend, there was a group that had 1,138 volunteers out cleaning up. Sunday morning, I got an email from their CEO telling me that almost all their volunteers were walking around with burlap bags with nothing in it because of how clean, and he complimented us on how clean our beach is. This is a group that professionally goes around and does those
That's
things.
48
When was that implemented?
Huh?
for Ocean.
Yes, correct.
When was this change implemented from 5:30 in the morning and then more
About
boots
two
on
and
the
a half,
ground?
about 2.5 years ago.
Okay, so Michael had asked me, and so did Brian, to give timelines, take pictures, and take notes for dates, or maybe it was just Brian.
Well, yeah, well,
And I do have that. I've
Okay,
asked,
yep,
because I swim on the beach with a large group of women and men, and when we're going down Tower 7, there's just strewn of trash, and it's 9 o'clock in the morning. So the baskets are full. So
Okay,
it's
well,
just
no, wait,
something
wait,
that
wait,
has not
okay,
been
no,
addressed.
but here's the answer to that. The answer to that is because this, especially this time of year, there are turtles nesting on the beach, and we cannot get out on the beach with any equipment at all. That's anything, not a golf cart, not a mule, nothing, until the state-approved contractor, which is CMA, goes through and gives us the all clear and allows us to start operating on the beach. They start at the south end of the beach, and they make their way to the north end of the beach. So by 9 o'clock, we're not even allowed in that area yet.
So not even people boots on the ground without machines or flashlights before 9 a.m.?
Well, you know how many employees we would need to be able to put boots on the
But
ground to
see,
do
that's
that?
something that needs to be addressed as far as maybe budgeting and for more, especially with Imagine Clearwater at our back door. So these are things that are concerns for the people that are living here, and it's yet to be addressed. And yet we're forecasting for a lot more people to come in.
I think what she's saying, by the way, I volunteered at CMA. So I'm very. But what she had suggested about the little compactors, that might be something that we could suggest from the board.
We have those out on Mandalay right now. They're called big belly trash cans.
Thank you.
And so there is that device there. Back in the day, Parks and Recreation used to have employees do what you said, put boots on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Be prepared for the workman comp claims that we're gonna have from that. Okay, that's why they went to mechanical operation, because it is incredibly expensive, not only the amount of staff they have to put out there, but the amount of back injuries that come from it. And so one of the ways to combat that was to do the load and pack operation, which now we used to only do first thing in the morning, we now do twice a day.
But they're just staying in the vehicle. They're not getting out and addressing the shoreline. They're just going down the road where all the baskets are.
That's the equipment that rakes the beach every morning.
Is
That
there
does all that.
these, what do you call them, big bellies?
Yeah, the ones on Mandalay, yes.
Okay. Could we suggest that maybe the budget be modified to add more of those in areas where?
They could not be successful on the sand. The sand would deteriorate the mechanical element of it.
So they don't work on the sand?
Yeah, that's why on Mandalay, they're successful. We also have them in downtown, but they're not.
Okay. And I understand, no, the turtles are gonna win.
But, yeah, but to your point, one of the things, and I've already brought it up to the city manager and the assistant city manager, we're gonna have to look, because here's one of the things that we deal with, okay? We've turned in the budget for next summer. We turned it in back in March for the summer of 2020 without the benefit of seeing what this summer's gonna bring. So we're forecasting 18 months in advance you know, what we need to do. And what we're seeing is we're spending an inordinate amount of overtime money and holding people over that are already working 10-hour days in order to deal with the trash. You probably remember back at a time when the lifeguards got off the beach at 4 o'clock. Okay? That's something, we were the first ones off the beach. That's something we changed. And they worked 10-hour days from March 1st until Labor Day, and then on the weekends in the month of September. Again, to address the demand about how popular the beach is become. So we're not ignoring it. We're being very cognizant of it, and we've made a series of changes that have cost considerable amount of money in order to facilitate those.
Me as a resident choose to spend that money for what we're addressing right now. It's so important. It's so important.
My biggest cost center.
Imagine. Anyone else? Okay. I move to adjourn.
Right. Thanks for having me.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.